Hi, JB.
Hi,
It's good to
Krista.
see your lovely
And
face.
Yeah, good to see your lovely faces too, Alton and Krista. We have you guys here tonight. And first and foremost, we would like to thank Bella Vista Hotel. This is what we call a Hills Podcast.
Yes.
We want to give a shout out for giving us the free booking because you book here for
Yes.
free.
So nice.
It is free. So yeah, thank you so much, Hills Podcast at Villa Vista Hotel. Today we are going to talk about boundaries, and I think for a lot of people they know a lot about boundaries, and for some cultures, boundaries is like very much not recognized. And this is what we want to talk about today because we know boundaries and we heard about walls as well. A lot of people is having hard time differentiating boundaries and walls. So if I were to ask you guys, how do you? We want to start with how do you define boundaries and walls, and what are the differences?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I think the way I see it is boundaries is you set boundaries so you can interact with people. You set walls so you can isolate yourself. I think that's the fundamental difference for me. Um, yeah, wall is to push people out. Boundary is to sort of create a structure that you're safe, your needs are met, and you can function so that you can interact with other people in a place of strength, I suppose. Um, yeah, but ultimately, one is to push people off, one is to isolate, one is to the goal is to interact. I think that's how I would see it.
I love the interaction versus isolation differentiation
Yeah.
that you made, babe. I think for me, boundaries really are my response. They're what I do in response to someone else's actions or behaviors. And I feel like a wall would need to be in response to a long-standing, very destructive pattern of behavior. I may choose to put up a boundary after an incidence of behavior or a few incidents of behavior. I don't feel like I would get to a wall phase. Hopefully never, but I don't feel that I would arrive there unless it was a demonstrable pattern of highly destructive behavior. So I think there's a magnitude difference there to consider as well.
Me personally, I would say, when you say boundaries, it's just setting limits on certain things. It's not to push people away, but to let the other person aware that you are vulnerable in certain things, and then these are your limits, and it has to be acknowledged and recognized. While wall, like you guys mentioned, that it is to isolate and to push people away. Um, at certain extent, I would say, like you said, that you may not be able to like um, establish a wall, especially if you're a Christian. It's kind of like difficult to do that.
Yeah.
I don't think I love this quote that says you cannot build a ministry if you put walls around your heart. But in your own personal experience, how do you have set boundaries in painful experiences?
Painful experience. I mean, sometimes I have like a lighthearted one, but I think if you want to go straight for a painful, I'll set the scene and then you can go.
Okay.
I think like one of the times, like sometimes I remember as a personal trainer, some like you work in an environment in the gym where body odor is a given, right? And I remember one of my client comes in and he was just, wow, it was just mind blowing. Like it was unbearable. Like the moment you step into a certain proximity, it was just like wretched, right? And so I literally have to have that conversation. And it can be such a little thing, but it can still be like difficult to set a boundary. It's like, hey, look, like I don't want to say this, but this is like what needs to be said so that we can continue to have a relationship and have the session proceed forward. But this is just a small little, you know, incident. What would you say? Like,
Yeah.
more serious magnitude.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've had multiple experiences of having to set firm relational boundaries because of long-standing, highly destructive patterns of behavior. And in those instances, it breaks your heart. It broke my heart because setting a boundary is costly. Setting a boundary leads to loss, and therefore, setting a boundary leads to grief many times. So it wasn't a fun thing to do, but it was a necessary thing to do for my emotional safety, for my health. And in those instances, one in particular I'm thinking of, I communicated directly with the person. I let this person know how they could contact me. I let them know how they could not contact me. I let them know very directly what I would accept as acceptable behavior and what I would not accept. So it was very focused upon, this is how I will respond if you make this choice. You are the one making these choices. I am the one that's responsible and in control of my response. So I want to clearly communicate what my responses will be in reaction to your choices. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm curious though, like, how would you know if your boundary that you are setting is healthy or not? Or even a question is like, how would you even know if it's about if it is a boundary or if it is already a wall?
Mm.
Because I think um there's a thin line between boundaries and wall.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I know is that when I talk to them, like I would say this boundary is a pretty new discussion to me. I mean, we talk about boundaries before, but we never really understood what it was because I grew up in a culture where we don't acknowledge boundaries. It's just that it's just culturally different. And then I came here, and then people have their boundaries, things you can't talk about, things you can't mention, because they have triggers. And yeah, and at first, I'll be honest with you, it frustrates me in the conversation because when I try to be vulnerable with someone, I want to go all out with a conversation, regardless of what terms I am using. But I can't say certain words because that person is gonna get triggered by the words I'm using, and therefore now my brain, instead of flowing with trying to be vulnerable with someone, you can't do that anymore because I don't even know what other words to use because I was not used to that.
Yeah.
So I ended up frustrated because I wanted to open my heart to this person. Just a friend to friend conversation in church, and you're both Christians because you're establishing friendship in this new place, and it kind of frustrates me that I can't even fully express myself because the person I'm talking to has triggers, and I don't really know if that is healthy. Maybe for the person who's setting it for him or her is healthy, but for me, like trying to establish a meaningful conversation with someone, I find it to be truly frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how would you say, how can you determine, it's like, if this is a boundary or this is a wall, or is this healthy or this is not?
The phrase unhealed comes to mind. Unhealed trauma. And it seems like what you're encountering is someone on that journey toward healing, but maybe they're not as far along that journey as you would hope or as you would want. And I think that it's then a question that you need to ask yourself, that you need to reflect on, to say, okay, am I the right person? Am I the one to walk with this other person as they walk out that healing journey. And also, from my perspective, from what I can see at least, are they walking out that healing journey, or are they complacent? Are they happy to stay in a place of unhealth and not pursuing that healing? And I think that that takes time to discern. I think that that takes conversation with them to discern, like you're saying. And it really comes down to, at least from my perspective, what you're in a place to provide in terms of that support as they continue to heal.
The first word that comes in mind is capacity. But also, interestingly, going by what you said as well, JB, it seems like you have a perimeter for what a friendship need to look like.
Yeah.
And that is an all-out vulnerability conversation. And that is, in a way, a boundaries. That is what you want to exercise. That's what you want to see and want to experience friendship with other people in that capacity. But unfortunately, not a lot of people have the capacity to get there. And so that's why I suppose like good friendship is so far in between, because just because someone have the desire, they might not be a good match with you simply because of their upbringing, their unhealed trauma, their personality, what takes them, what doesn't take them. Sometimes can just be the person just tired, like me and Krista.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about something that is emotionally loaded or something that is serious to me, I don't get tired anymore. I get fired up. But with her, when she gets tired, her capacity goes down.
Yeah.
And so we have the same value in the intention, but our execution need to be respectful. I cannot unload all the thoughts and things I want to say to her at that moment when she is exhausted.
Yeah.
I need to find a better time to do it. But vice versa, on her side, when she can see me, I'm clearly like processing a lot. She would try to create a little bit more margin and
Yeah.
open up a bit more space for me. And so I guess going back to boundaries and walls, I think at that moment, if I have a wall, there will be a lot of rejection there, right? There will be a lot of rejection. Like I will feel rejected and I will reject her. Right?
Yeah.
I'll be like, why do you not be on the same page with me? I'm upset with you now, right? So there's both way rejections. Or if she having a wall on me, she would be like, just shut it down. Like, hey, I'm tired. I'm done. I don't care.
Yeah.
And why are you hustling me right now when I'm tired, right? So I think that is like what walls can do. And I think a lot of them due to vulnerability with lack of emotional maturity.
Yeah.
Then all
Yeah,
of a
very
sudden,
good.
then you are just
Yeah, that's so
position
good.
yourself in
That's
the
so
position
good.
of victim. And when you're in a victim, you retaliate, you lashed out, right? But if you have vulnerability with emotional maturity, then you're in a place of navigating those emotions,
Yeah.
and you can communicate that clearly. And when you're in that place of doing that, you pass the ball back to the other person, right? Because communication, relationship, it's always a two-way things.
Yeah.
So, I think going back to your situation, for instance, if you after you process that, you say, "Hey," let's just say Mary is the person. Say, "Hey, Mary, I just want to say that this is like actually frustrating me a little bit, and not to offend you or anything. It's just that I'm just in a flow. I really want to pour my heart out. I want to be vulnerable with you because this is how I connect with people, and I feel like I cannot do that with you. How does that make you feel? Like, can we discuss on this a little bit?" So I think there is a layer on that. But to do that, you need to be okay with being vulnerable and handle rejection
Yeah.
as well.
Definitely.
Which is
Definitely.
if a person don't have that, like sort of haven't worked on that emotions, haven't dealt with that, will find it very difficult to uphold boundaries.
Yeah.
Because it will be very painful.
Mhm.
It will be very hurtful, and uncomfortable, to sort of navigate that. So that's my
I think
thoughts.
I like when you said it. Vulnerability with emotional maturity.
Yeah.
I guess that's what we need. All of us need that. Because personally speaking, I did not know, like personally, I did not know how to set boundaries, but eventually you learn how to set boundaries. Like for example, I have my own triggers on certain things that's being done or said, but I also have to consider that the other person don't mean any ill with what they're saying.
Yeah.
Although I'm triggered, if you are going to be, we're gonna have a conversation, even in this podcast. If you're gonna say something that would trigger me, I will not react to that because we're having a meaningful conversation. You're free to say whatever you want to say, and you are free to express yourself, and I'm giving it to you. My triggers, that's me to deal with. So I'll deal with that. I'll deal with that later or maybe now. But like I have my triggers and my boundaries, but I'm okay for anyone to cross those triggers and boundaries for as long as it means no harm. Like for example, I guess the most classic example I have is that I'm not comfortable when people greet happy birthday in public spaces. I'll be honest, I'm not comfortable with that.
Noted.
Yeah, so in private spaces, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine. In public spaces, I had this conversation with Sheena. Like in public spaces, I'm not comfortable to be greeted happy birthday, but I also acknowledge that's also how you express your appreciation. And I appreciate that. That's how you
Yeah.
express your love.
Yeah.
And I should be thankful more than just being hurt because my boundaries were not respected.
Mm.
So I would prefer not, but if you would do that, I will not stop you
Yeah.
because if that's how you express your love towards me, and I will accept that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you guys are gonna say happy birthday to me in public spaces. I'm not comfortable with that, but it's okay.
I love that you're bringing up benevolence
Yeah.
versus malevolence,
Mhm.
right? Because I think these are two really important topics in the area of boundaries and walls. I really feel this is a personal conviction, so I'm not saying everyone has to hold this conviction, but particularly as a Christian, I really feel it's important to set boundaries with benevolence
Mhm.
and not with malevolence, not with vindictiveness, right? A boundary should be set, like Alton said, for interaction, for relationship to continue.
It's true.
And that needs to come from a benevolent place. That needs to come from a place that genuinely cares for, that genuinely loves on this other person. It doesn't need to come from a place where it shouldn't come from a place of
Yeah.
wanting to cause them harm.
Yeah.
It shouldn't come from a place of
Yeah.
wanting to get back at them. No,
Mm.
that's not God's heart, right?
true.
That's not his
It's
heart
true.
towards us.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be our heart toward other people.
I would agree.
It's easy to fall into that. I certainly have. Let's be clear. That's how I know this. That's how I've learned these lessons. But I think it's really important to try and embody the heart of God as much as possible.
Mhm.
But I also had a great conversation recently within the past year with one of my girls that was in the midst of establishing very firm boundaries. One might even call them walls in response to highly toxic and damaging behavior of those around her. And we had a great conversation about the fact that while we try and embody the heart of God as God shapes us and molds us to become more like him, we're also not God. And God doesn't expect us to act like him exactly and to be God, right? To other people. So I think it requires prayer in the midst of that really challenging situation where these firm boundaries do need to be set for her health and for her safety. And she's also trying to love and honor and respect these people that are very toxic. So it's messy. It's not easy.
It is not.
And it does require so much prayer and counsel and time often because at least for me, I want to give someone as many chances as I can, but I am not God. I have my limits, right? And I need to maintain that safety and that health, because I don't have an unlimited pool to pull from. I'm not God. I'm just a human. And so I do have to function within those limits.
That's very good. What comes in mind is definitely Romans 12:18.
I love Romans 12, baby. You know this.
I
It's one of
love
my
Romans
favorite
12. Let's go, bro.
chapters.
Podcast, hashtag Jesus.
Yeah.
If it is possible on your part, live at peace with everyone. I think healthy boundaries, the baseline should definitely set above your limits, right? Because that's what ultimately a boundaries need to do. One of the prime function is to protect you. If you have completely exhaust your energy and your capacity, and your limit is sorry, your boundary setting way below your limit, then that is not a healthy boundaries. Yes, I really love sort of what you bring up there.
Establishing firm boundaries, especially when you're hurt,
Yeah.
around toxic environment, because I think I've also went through a season where the situation was so painful, and I would say that I did not just establish a boundary, but I established a wall,
Yeah.
like really a wall.
Yeah.
And my personal belief is that at certain season, I think you need the walls, especially
agree.
if you are hurting so bad. But in long term, it is not healthy. You need to heal.
Mhm.
It's not something like, oh, I'll just wait for God to heal me. Although it takes time to heal, and healing is within the hands of God and your desire as well to heal, because each and every person is different. So some people heal um, instantly. Some people takes years
Yeah.
to heal, because pain looks different in every person, and every person has their own timeline. You can't rush healing, as much as like you also don't want to delay it. If you find treatment right away, then go for the treatment, because you need to heal. Walls are helpful, I would say, only at certain period of time, but throughout extended time,
Mm.
it is not healthy, because it's gonna push people away, even the people that you dearly love.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hurt people, right? I guess like my curiosity comes from how you define boundaries and more, because it seems like, just going by what you're saying, boundary is when I'm healthy, walls is when I'm unhealthy.
Oh
But
wow.
that's what I ascertain.
Oh wow, that's good, man. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, but I think boundaries should be fluid in the sense of it should mold with your capacity.
Yeah.
And so if
Yeah.
you are wounded, if you in a place of, hurt, then in a way, our boundaries need to be adapt to that. And so now, first of all, I want to address one big point is when you are triggered, like the word, I suppose, like how we define by triggered is you pretty much lose like your cool, right? Your fuse has been blown. So if you say I'm triggered but I'm okay, you're not triggered, right? So you're just uncomfortable. It's just not your preference, right? Yeah. So, but if you actually blown your fuse, so it actually happened to me recently. Like when you lose your cool, right? That's when you trigger. And a lot of time when you're hurt, you need to adjust your boundaries accordingly. So I guess like in a way, just to like I suppose like challenge your thoughts, you can still set healthy boundaries in a place of wound, but it will look very different
Yep.
compared to when you're healthy, right? You might need to be like, okay, look, I just cannot hang out with people after 5 p.m. I just need to rest, you know? And I feel like
boundary.
because yeah, right?
That is a good boundary.
Right? Because here's the thing, right? I feel like a lot of time people that are passive, they allow other people to label their boundaries. Right? It's like, oh, you know what? You're not gonna hang out with me, you put up a wall. Right? And I don't think that is right. But that being said, if you have people that are spiritual, like counselors in your life or close friend, and they are bringing up to your attention that, hey, I think you're really like just rejecting and refusing everyone, then that is another situation, right? But just because you're hurt and you adjust your boundary to a place of, okay, I need more my time, I need more alone time, or I need more time with God, I don't think that's war. But you do have to have a level of discernment or have close friends
Yeah.
that are wise, and also perhaps people that you can subject yourself to, perhaps a counselor or pastor, or you know, your family, if they are also emotionally mature, to give you some sort of like, hey, you know, I think you've been locking up yourself in the room for 3 months, not talking to anyone. Maybe it's not a boundary, it's a wall. You know?
Yeah.
But maybe in sometimes like, hey, just because I didn't want to pick up your phone call right now at this time doesn't mean I put up a wall. You just need to relax.
Mm. I'm going
That's
to
true.
continue to tease this out, pull on the thread, because this may be controversial, I guess, but I do feel that sometimes walls are necessary. And I do feel that sometimes you can set walls from a very healthy place. I personally have done that only a small number of times. That is very much the exception and not the rule. But it needed to be done because of the magnitude of how destructive this other person's behaviors were in my life. And despite repeated chances for them to make different choices, they chose not to. And so at that point, I, under the guidance of a licensed therapist, had to say, no more. No more. You've lost your privilege of access to me. No more.
Wow.